Hello, and welcome back to the Academia and Research Collective. Today, we are going to be going over research basics, the fundamentals of research, different types of research, and just a general outline of what research is. So let's get straight into it. So, what is research? Well, I think that research can be broken out into multiple different parts. These parts include, first, systematic investigation. This is a structured approach to exploring specific questions or hypotheses or research problems that you're generating. Second part would be knowledge expansion. Of course, that's a big reason why we do research is to generate more knowledge so that we can contribute to new insights to a field of study. A third part will be critical inquiry. We want to analyze, evaluate, and synthesize with existing information to see what has already been done and see how we can build off of that information. Another thing would be method-driven. Research relies on having and planning out methodologies, research steps, and frameworks that you are using to guide your research. And then there's also the fact that research is, well, evidence-based. It uses data, observations, experiments to support and create conclusions about your own research. And then sometimes when you get to higher levels of academia, like in college, it can be peer-reviewed. This is validated through rigorous review by different experts who see if they think that your research was valid. And then lastly is ethical standards. All research has to have this, but we want to adhere to things like integrity, objectivity, and respect for testing subjects, especially if you're working with humans. There's very specific processes to make sure that all of your research is absolutely ethical. Next is, why does research matter? Well, it is a few reasons. First, like I said earlier, it generates new knowledge. We always want to be constantly expanding the amount of knowledge in specific fields or sectors. And research can also solve real-world problems. Think about things like medical devices. All of that was created through different types of research that ultimately led to surgeries becoming more safer and patient outcomes being even better than they are. Research also preserves information in a way. If you're building off of the knowledge that previously existed, you're utilizing past knowledge and making sure that that past knowledge stays, remembered and it just doesn't disappear. Research also promotes progress. With more innovation, that inevitably leads to more progress. And research also, for personal gain, you can encourage critical thinking because you're analyzing different problems from all of these different angles, and research also involves thinking about how to go through different stages of trial and error, making sure that mistakes don't harm your research projects too much, and thinking of solutions for mistakes and road bumps along the way all encourage critical thinking. And now I'm going to go over some key research concepts. These include research questions, hypotheses, engineering goals, data collection, and analysis. This is like the basic framework of research. You start with a research question and problem on something that you're passionate about. Then you have either a hypothesis, something you think will happen, or an engineering goal. Let's say you're doing an engineering project, you're trying to build something, you have a goal for what that thing that you're building will be able to accomplish. There's also data collection. So you need to test your hypotheses or maybe to see if your engineering project actually lives up to the goals that you've set for it. And then analysis / conclusion you can add, which is basically looking at the data and seeing what results you can draw from it. Was it a success? Was it a failure? Was it something in between? Now I want to go over a few types of research. I like to break down research into a few distinct categories. The first is basic research. Basic research is just expanding knowledge, not really a major specific application. This is just for general knowledge. So it's to understand like fundamental principles or theories. An example would be just going on Google, searching up what dark matter is, or maybe learning about an author's style of writing, right? These are things that are very basic, search it up on Google just to learn about it. The next thing would be applied research. Now, applied research aims to try and solve real-world problems using scientific methods and inventions. The goal is to have a practical application of your knowledge. Some examples include creating new drugs to treat cancer, or second thing is pairings. Pairings was actually my own research project that I had. It utilized AI and augmented reality in order to help patients do brain surgeries, actually surgeons to do brain surgery so that patients could have better outcomes. And so these are both using scientific methods to create new inventions, to apply knowledge like artificial intelligence or augmented reality technologies to expand and for a specific goal. Third is quantitative research, and as you can probably tell from the term quantitative, this is research that focuses purely on collecting and analyzing numerical data. So we want to test your hypotheses and look for patterns. Examples include conducting a survey to study consumer behavior, measuring the impact of temperature on plant growth. This is all very data-driven, and some of these methods could include things like surveys, statistical analysis, or numerical experiments. And then we have qualitative research. Once again, from the name, qualitative research explores experiences, behaviors, perceptions through non-numerical data as opposed to quantitative research. This goal is to gain insight into non-numerical topics. So some examples include things like studying the cultural impact of a new policy, interviewing patients to understand their healthcare experiences. These usually aren't that numerical based, right? The cultural impact might not be something that you can exactly show in numbers. Some methods include interviews, focus groups, and case studies. Now here is a nice chart that I have that goes over all of the different types of research, the four main types, and their purpose, data types, and examples. And maybe a lot of the research sometimes doesn't strictly fall into these categories. It's usually probably a combination of both, especially with quantitative and qualitative, or applied. With applied research, you can have quantitative data, like how successful something was with like speed and efficiency, or qualitative data, like how people feel about a certain thing. So these aren't set categories, and a lot of research actually falls into different categories. So you can take some time, pause the video, and read through this chart. Now, here is the basic research process. First is to identify a research question, and our next video will go in depth in how you can actually look into and search for a research question or problem for stuff that you're interested in. Next is to review the existing knowledge. This is also known as a literature review or lit review. You want to read up on research papers that have already been published on your topic, because we don't want to be replicating research that has already been done again. That unless you're building on it in a different manner, we don't want to do the exact same thing over again. And also, maybe you're not the most knowledgeable about the field yet, so you can do some existing literature review to kind of clear up on topics that you aren't clear on yet. But literature review is very, very important. Next is to choose or create a method to collect data. This is specific to each project that you might have. Different projects have different ways to collect data, but you want to collect data, whether quantitative or qualitative, in order to be able to analyze it, which is the next step, which is to collect and analyze your data. From all of the data you have, maybe it's participant feedback or numerical data. You might want to graph that data to see if you can spot patterns, and from those patterns and trends that you see in your data, you can do our last step, which is drawing conclusions. So here is where you can affirm whether your research question, which includes your hypotheses and your engineering goals, whether those were supported based on the data, and that will be your conclusion. Now, here are some characteristics of good research. I think that all research projects should try to stay along these lines and have these characteristics. The first is a clear and focused research question or engineering goals. This is important. You want your question to, be clear. It's not something very muddy. It also shouldn't be something too broad, something that's too big, like we mentioned earlier, like what is antimatter? This is extremely big. It's not something that you can readily study in a very, very nice, neat experiment. Along with this, though, your research question engineering goals should be hyper-specific and should be realistic. I especially emphasize hyper-specific because I think that, from my experience, the best research projects are those that are specific and tailored to a specific and niche thing, because then you can really dive deep and expand your knowledge into an area where no one has really gone before. Take this example. This is just one of my favorites. This is from a project from the International Science and Engineering Fair a few years ago, and this person's title was "A Novel End-to-End Pipeline for Stock Quality Assessment of a Case Study in Shrimp Post-Larvae Screening from Robust Data Acquisition to Autonomous Segmentation and Systematic Characterization of Count, Size, and Vitality." Now that is a very hyper-specific research question. Your research question probably won't be as specific, but this is just a very good example of a person who has a hyper-specific engineering goal and research question, along with realistic goals. Even in the title, they talk about characterizing count, size, and vitality. That is realistic goals that this person could actually measure for their project. Another thing is a logical and systematic approach. You want your research to be logic driven and have a systematic approach in that the methodology and the research plan that you have makes sense and can be followed. This does not mean that it has to be perfect. There will be mistakes along the way. There will be road bumps inevitably along the way, but your research process should be logical and systematic. So here is the structured method. You want to start with a hypothesis or engineering goals, move to data collection and then analysis and then conclusion. It's the same thing we talked about earlier, but you want to make sure that everything you do is structured so that when road bumps, or mistakes do arise, you'll be able to deal with those very effectively and quickly because your approach is so structured. Now, the third characteristic of good research is reliable and valid data. Make sure that your research method is controlled, the data you're taking is having the right controlled variables, your research measures what it claims to measure. This might seem obvious, but look, if you're doing a research project that measures the accuracy rate of something, you want to be measuring the accuracy rate. You want to be measuring extraneous things. And the third thing is your data is reproducible. And this can be proven actually through different statistical analyses that we will talk about in later videos. But if you follow the steps above, your data should be reproducible. You want to minimize the fact that all of the results that you got were just from pure luck, right? So, common research challenges. So, some common research challenges that I've seen is a lack of clarity and specificity in your research. Like we talked about earlier, you want your research goals to be specific and be realistic. Another one is difficulty finding reliable data. A lot of times, especially for work, one of the best examples is I do a lot of research in AI and machine learning. And trying to get training data for that is definitely a challenge sometimes. But also, if you're doing an experiment and you can't get reliable data, you might have to change your methodology, maybe change how you're conducting certain things. These are all common challenges that you will have to trial and error through. Another one is time constraints. Sometimes especially for things like ICEF projects or science fairs, you have a limited amount of time. So you need to make sure that you're dedicating ample time to research projects and making sure that you can complete everything that you can on time. So yeah, that's it. This was just a really basic guide to the research process and also just research in general. Next week, we'll be going over how to actually formulate your own research problems and methodologies / engineering goals, and we hope to see you there. This was the Academia Research Collective. Thank you.